Okay. Right. Just to get everyone onto the same page, there's a definition that's commonly used for eco-industrial parks. Again, you can read for yourself. I'm not going to read that for you. What is important, however, to understand is that what the DTIC has done at the time that the eco-industrial park framework was developed by UNIDO, World Bank, and GIZ, the DTIC also looked at its framework for industrial parks. And without knowing this, we actually adopted the same definition. Okay? Which you might argue is coincidence. I don't think there's something like coincidence. Okay? So, quite frankly, I think it was heavily inspired because automatically now there's quite a lot of alignment between what we want to do from a DTIC's perspective and what an EIP approach is. I think what is maybe just one thing to say on an eco-industrial park is it's not just about the environmental aspect. Too many people, when you mention the word eco, put it equivalent to, ecosystem, so environmental. Eco-industrial parks is not just about environment. It is about all three pillars of sustainability, which is about the social side, the economic side, and the environmental side. Okay? You cannot do the one without the other. And I think that's important to understand, right? And like Lee mentioned earlier, there are many cross-cutting themes the moment you take an eco-industrial park approach. And we have to do that. Effectively, what we need to consider here is that we are functioning in a world and a society today where we no longer can do things linearly. Okay? Compared to, let's say, 100 years ago, and I'm going to give you a quick example, and then we'll get back into the presentation. Okay? 100 years ago, if I wanted to go and mine gold somewhere, all I had to do is, assuming that I had the equipment and the money and everything else, I would just go to some government somewhere and just ask for the rights, and off I go and do it. Today, you can't do that anymore for a number of reasons. Okay? I'm not going to get into those reasons. The point I'm trying to make is that we have to do here with a very complex system. Okay? And the eco-industrial park approach assists us to work with the complexities of the system. Right. So without getting too technical and too complicated and complex, excuse the pun, about this whole process, you've got to understand that we have to deal here with something that consists of multiple parts. Okay? Right. Let's continue. So I'm going to stand still on that definition. Henry might touch on this as well. Eco-industrial parks come by many different names. Okay, and this is just for your own point of reference. It could be called an eco-manufacturing zone, okay, or anything like that. So there's all kinds of combinations that you will find, but effectively, the environment is the same. The objectives of an eco-industrial park approach or framework is typically as we've outlined here. So I think the most important one is to have a common understanding, all right? And I was thinking about it this morning, while I sat in the plenary session. People very often, for example, use the term just transition. However, in South Africa, you talk to anyone and you'll get multiple definitions of what a just transition is. That probably is one of our problems, and I don't want to criticize the just transition. That's not the point, okay? The point is, if I mention to you the word apple, what do you visualize? Okay, it's a simple principle of good communication. We've got to make sure that we understand each other. Okay, so I think the first point, of course, of an international EIP framework and its objectives and the approach we accordingly follow in South Africa as well is to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay. The second one is, of course, to identify opportunities, because at the end of the day, this is not about talking. And while I'm standing here today talking, you've got to understand that there's a lot that can happen on the ground. Now, Ndivui already touched on that. Henry is going to talk a bit more about that. There are things happening on the ground, and that is what this is about. This is not just about talking, it's actually about changing the way we do things. I'm not going to stand still on the rest. You can think for yourself, or if you want to engage on this, I want to see if I can reduce the amount of time that we have here. So, the Eco-Industrial Park framework is built on a number of core pillars. And I already mentioned the economic, the social, and the environmental aspects. Okay, these are pillars, as you know, of the globally accepted definition of sustainability, which, by the way, dates back to the early 90s as it was put forward by the United Nations. Okay? So this is not new. This has been around for quite a while. Okay? So obviously an eco-industrial park approach needs to have at least these three pillars. But there are two or three others that we really want to touch on. And that is, of course, that we want to look at the spatial planning and the zoning aspect. Okay? So talking about, sometimes in the South African context, we use the term master planning. Maybe not the best term to use, okay? But that kind of approach. And then, of course, really talking about park management, so the governance side. So some of you might be able to relate this back to ESG reporting, okay? Those of you are familiar with that. Okay, so there is a bit of overlap. Right, if we continue, there are some very clear benefits to an eco-industrial park approach. Okay, a lot of people, especially 10, 15 years ago, if you put this on the table, would say to you, yeah, okay, so this is about tree hugging, if I may use that term. Okay, this is about the greenies. This is about someone who has a passion, about the bee in the bonnet. It is not about that. Okay, the eco-industrial park approach, like I said earlier, within the complexities that we are faced today, provides us a mechanism of addressing the multiple aspects and components of the system that we are faced with. Okay, that's all it is. So it's not complicated, right? It's really straightforward. It allows us the ability to focus on the economics, the environmental, and the social aspect. And that's important. Now, when you look at the economics, it has rands and cents impact on the company. And that's one of the key benefits that's up there. Okay? So this is not just about, looking green and, being branded as carbon, neutral or carbon zero or whatever. It's not just about that. That is equally important. But it is about competitiveness. It is about opening up new value chains, new opportunities for products, new opportunities for jobs and SMEs and so on. Okay? So that's important to see. I just want to touch on one or two others. Creation of skilled jobs. Jobs is a big conversation point in South Africa. Jobs, however, need to add value. You can't just create jobs for the purpose of just creating jobs. Okay? They actually need to contribute something. Right? Now, if you look from an EIP perspective, what you're doing is you are building that capacity for people to actually add value at whatever level it is. Okay? And again, I'm sorry, I don't have time this morning to go into all the intricacies of that. Okay? Probably something else that I just want to point out is this one here. Stronger collaboration between different partners and different organizations. Okay? If there's one thing that the EIP approach really enhances and encourages, is collaboration and working together. And I can give you many examples of the benefits of that, and I'll get to one or two of those a bit later on. But collaboration is crucial, and maybe I can just make a last point, to really make, or elevate this point. And that is, the South African economy is too small for us, amongst ourselves, to bicker and continue pulling in all kinds of directions. And we need to wake up to that reality. Because the rest of the world is getting this picture, and the countries are working within themselves much more effectively than we are doing here. And excuse the pun, can we apply resource efficiency to how we work in this country? Okay? Think about it, right? We are competing in a global marketplace. It is no longer just one company or the government department or someone. It's everyone in this country. So we need to wake up to the reality of that, and the way that you do that is by collaboration. Okay, let's continue. I think key to the EIP approach is that it's about continuous improvement. Okay? It is about building excellence. It is not something that you achieve in the term of government. Okay? So it's not something you do over a 3 or 5 year term. It is a long-term approach, and it's incremental. And what's critical is you start off with doing one thing. Okay? Those of you who are familiar with the industrial spaces in South Africa, we have all kinds of industrial spaces. We have special economic zones, we have industrial parks, we have some areas that are only zoned industrial, Okay? But each of these are at a particular point in the developmental cycle or in their lifetime. So how do you apply an EIP approach in this space? Well, you need to identify that first step that will work for your environment. And that's the beauty of an EIP approach. It's flexible. It does not force you to start at one point and then continue. You can plug it in where it best fits your need. Okay? Again, we can hopefully have a bit of a conversation about that. Some of those things that you need to look at from an industrial park perspective when you plan it, when you want to find customized solutions, when you find or looking for answers to the questions that you have in your space, are things like this. But there's a lot more. Okay, sorry, I can't. Actually, you can't put this all on one slide. Okay? This is just to give you some examples of the kind of things. But the kind of questions you need to ask yourself is, what are the conditions locally? And this is an interesting point that I've seen from the DTIC's perspective. We have a number of industrial parks in the country that were established 30, 40 years ago under the apartheid government, okay, where the context and the environment was different. Now you suddenly sit with an environment and a space that could be utilized, but an industrial park might not be the best solution. Okay? In other cases, you might have an industrial park that might make sense economically, and there is a good business case, but you need to enhance it. Enter an EIP approach, okay? To assist you in actually tackling that. Again, I'm not going to stand still on this too long. Success factors for an EIP design. Again, talking about the relevance of eco-industrial park approaches in South Africa. Now, anyway, let me go and stand on this side. Those of you that, if your neck goes that way now your neck can go that way. So, the importance of an eco-industrial park way of thinking is to find how can you add value to the current industrial space that you might be operating in, that you might be a management entity of, that you might be the owner of, etc. Again, looking at international case studies and you know, all the kind of research that's been done in this space, the kind of things that we need to do to keep our industrial spaces competitive and offering a good value to industry are a lot more than just a landlord-tenant relationship. Okay? If we're going to continue running industrial parks in South Africa and SEZs from a landlord-tenant perspective, we are not going to have these in the next 10 years. And I'm happy to put my name to that. Because you cannot compete without adding the added value. Okay? And that's where the eco-industrial park approach is a great one. There are others, again, okay? So, you know, let's not be too stuck on just the EIP approach, but I think the EIP approach is really a great approach because it allows you that openness of finding other mechanisms, finding other value propositions that you can add as an industrial park. And that's why this is so important to industrial development in South Africa, okay? Because it puts us into a different mindset. It moves us out of the frame where we've been for so many years to think differently about things, okay? So I'm not going to stand still on those success factors again. Maybe I can just point out this one here, multi-stakeholder engagement. Okay, those of you who have not heard me speak, you will hear this for the first time. Those who know me, I'm sorry to repeat the message. Okay, it's all about collaboration. Okay, it's all about finding partners, and the partners are there. Okay, and that's the function probably that I play and a number of others play in this space that is probably most instrumental in growing the eco-industrial park approach. Because we need to recognize that not one single organization or person can do this all by themselves. Okay? DTIC knows it can't do all of this. We know it. But the same way, a property developer knows that they can't do all these things themselves. Okay? So what you need to do is you need to find opportunities to bring other people in to provide those kinds of services, to add that value that you need to actually increase competitiveness, make the working environment better for people, and also, of course, have an impact for the local community. And hopefully in that whole process, if you introduce industrial symbiosis and life cycle management and resource efficiency and all these kinds of things, that you have a better impact on the environment as well. Okay. Right, let's continue. RECP, I've just mentioned that, resource efficiency and cleaner production. It's probably one of the core activities in an eco-industrial park, which sets it apart from a traditional industrial park. Okay? So you need to look at, and it was touched on earlier as well in the plenary, you need to look at what the possibilities are of utilizing one company or one industry's waste as an input into a new product or something else that some other company is doing. Okay? So co-location, clustering of industry becomes important. Right? Again, I don't want to talk about RECP, okay? Because otherwise that's going to take a whole other presentation as well. Okay? But I think it's important to understand that RECP is one of those core pillars, and it's probably a low-hanging fruit for many. Okay? Ndivuyo mentioned earlier energy efficiency being, an easy gain. Okay? In terms of profitability for a company, in terms of impact on the balance sheet. Okay? So that is important. So that's why I mentioned RECP. If you continue, I just put these up as some examples. You can go and Google them. I don't want to talk about them. I don't think there's time. Please forgive me for that. I know we are behind time, so I'm going to go a bit more like a steam train running through this. I did mention earlier that apart from the eco-industrial park framework, there are others. So I just thought I'll put the slide together just to, give you a bit of other perspectives and just to touch on these things. Okay, so there's something called design thinking that was developed by the IDO organization. There's things like PMBOK, Project Management Book of Knowledge, which is important in terms of project and program and portfolio management. And I put that there because I'm a certified project manager. Okay, so from my perspective, it's important to apply those principles if you want to implement things. The Natural Capital Protocol. Those of you who are not familiar with this, go and have a look at the Natural Capital Protocol. It's a useful frame of reference for planning and designing decision-making in a particular environment. Okay? And it looks at things from a capital perspective. So it's not just financial capital, it's human capital. Okay? It's organizational capital. It's different forms of capital that are serving as an input into you producing something. Okay? And how do you make your decisions based on that? But there are others. Okay? In South Africa, of course, we have the National Development Plan. This is important. Okay? Because ultimately, if you want support, especially if you're a small SME, and you might want support from someone in the country or maybe from government, you need to know where this fits into the National Development Plan as well. Okay? Because ultimately, we don't function in little silos. Some of us think we do. Okay? But we don't. Right? So it's important to understand that context. SDGs, of course, I doubt there's anyone in this room that doesn't know what an SDG is. Okay? So the Sustainable Development Goals are critical. They're supposed to guide us to a future that's sustainable for humanity and for the whole planet as a whole. Okay? I don't think they are negotiable. That's just me, that's my opinion. You might have a different opinion. If you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. Okay? ESG reporting, I touched on that. GRI as well. The ABCD, maybe I just mention that because that's probably not as well known. ABCD stands for the Asset-Based Community Development Model. Okay? It's used by Korta in South Africa, quite successfully in some cases. So it's useful to look at. Why? Because an industrial park is never in isolation. Okay? An industrial park sits within a community. How do you engage with a community? Community being not just the people and the community organizations, but the local councillors, local municipality. How do you engage with civil society? How do you engage with other organizations? How do you engage with government? How do you engage with province? Okay? This is part of an ecosystem. Coming back to what I started out as. Okay? Understanding that we have to deal with a system. There's multiple components of a certain level of complexity that we have to work with. Okay? And I think the ABCD approach is quite useful in that. Then, of course, on the right-hand side, I just put down the EIP framework where we've applied it in the DTIC. So both those pyramids relate to what the DTIC has done in pulling this into our thinking and into our policy making. Okay? Very often people say, yeah, but government, you don't look at what's out there. Not true in this case. Okay, and I did mention already that we've actually built, incidentally, it was very, it's just amazing how it worked. But we've developed our industrial framework on very similar lines to what the EIP framework is. Okay, but that's not the only one. There's others as well, but this is just for you for reference. I just briefly want to touch again on the sustainability dimensions. Okay, from an EIP perspective, remember that sustainability is not just about the environment. Okay, and I just put some bullets next to every one of those just to trigger your thinking a bit. But it's about the environmental side. It is about how do you link the economic benefits to add value at an environmental and a social level. Okay? We need to stop thinking that it's all about money. Because it's all about money has put us in this position where we are now, where we've utilized resources on this planet that is not sustainable. We cannot continue like that. Okay? So we have to think differently. And the way to do that is to think about these different aspects within the context of the others. Okay? I just gave an example from the environmental perspective. Economic perspective is exactly the same thing. Okay? The profit that I'm making as a company, what is the value I'm adding at a social and environmental level to the community, to the country, to my people that work in my organization? Okay? We cannot continue thinking about an approach to economics and saying, well, I'm paying a person a salary, they must just do what I'm telling you. COVID has shown us that this does not work. Okay? If that doesn't make sense to you, happy to engage with you afterwards. Okay? We have to think differently about these things. We have to apply different lenses all at the same time. Okay? So I just wanted to put that out there just to trigger your thinking a bit. The risk environment that we're looking at. Eco-industrial parks are important, not just because it provides a mechanism for industrial development in the future. It's also important because it helps us address a number of risks we have in South Africa. Again, I'm not going to talk about all of those. Okay? I just wanted to give you some insights into the complexities of what this whole picture looks like. Okay? Because ultimately it's not just one risk. Okay? The risk is not sustainability. The risk is not climate change. The risk is all of these things. Okay? And the moment you look at it from a systems perspective, there's an interesting level of complexity that suddenly comes into play. And that is the interaction between these different components. Okay? Again, the eco-industrial park approach helps us in dealing with that, so that we're not overwhelmed by the complexities and the size of the problem. Right. Just EIP development in South Africa, just the national context, just for your information again. I'm trying to save some time. Sorry, how are we doing on time? Not good. Okay. Okay. Right. Sorry. You're going to have to go and look at this afterwards. Right. This is just to give you some context, just to assure you that the EIP work does relate back to government's priorities. This is important to understand. Okay. It's not some pie in the sky thing that somebody picked out, me in this case, and decided we have to do this. Okay. So I'm not going to stand still on that. EIP program approach in South Africa. There are 3 pillars that we're starting off on: water, energy, and waste, or resources. Actually, we need to move away from the term waste. Yeah. But again, different conversation. Okay, Suzanne can relate to that. Okay, and again, partnerships and collaboration. EIP activities to that, I'm not even going to touch that. You can go and read that. You'll all get the presentations afterwards. The role of the EIP approach in the Industrial Parks program, I've already touched on some of these. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I actually want to leave you with a couple of challenges and opportunities and what we need to do going forward. So some of the challenges we have, which were touched on in the plenary as well, for example, is financing. Okay? It's nice talking about this stuff. Okay? If you're a company and you need to introduce energy efficiency measures, it costs money. Okay? Where do you get the money from? So Henry might touch on it. I think, Henry, you are going to touch on it, right? So on the Global Eco-Industrial Park program, they've developed an access to finance tool. Okay? So that a company or an industrial park that needs assistance can get that assistance from a financial perspective, for example. Okay? There's a number of others. Again, I'll just use that as an example. Let me just go on to the next one. I think lessons learned is important. I've already mentioned collaboration. Okay? I think collaboration is key. And may I just say this? Forgive me for saying this. Don't you find it ironic that human beings, by definition, have the ability to communicate, yet we refuse to work together? Can someone just one day please explain that to me? Okay? Because honestly, the answer to a lot of our problems is collaboration. Okay. Let me just quickly touch on some of the others. We have an EIP roundtable. We've already had 11 sessions now. They happen every 2 months. Those of you who are not part of it, please grab Henry or Lee or myself, and we'll make sure that you are on the list. It's an open forum to share what we do in an eco-industrial park space. Okay? Not circular economy, not just transition. Although those are linked, its specific focus is on industry. Okay? Personal relationships. There are many of you sitting here who I have very good personal relationships with. Again, comes back to collaboration. You do not work with someone else if you don't trust them. Right? How do you build trust? Well, me being a typical white man, I like going to a coffee shop or having a beer or having a lunch. Okay? Other people do it differently. But you've got to build that trust through personal relationship. Okay? And if there's one thing that we've learned from the EIP process, it's that. Stakeholder management, again, fits with that. I'm not even going into that. Cross-sectoral, multidisciplinary approach. That touches on the whole point that I made about this being a system. System consists of all these components, and there's relationships between them. Okay? It's critical that we understand the complexities that we have to deal with. This is an important one. No agenda. Okay? Please. Can you leave your own personal agendas at the door? Okay? This is not a place where we play politics. This is not a place where we play personal power play. Okay? Why? Because you cannot collaborate if there's one party that wants to push their agenda. Doesn't work. Okay? And we've seen this. We see this all the time. Okay? Shared vision and alignment. I think that goes without saying. And of course, seeking a win-win. I'm almost done. Key principles. You can take these home with you. Out of our process, the kind of principles we've identified that are important for the transition for industry to a more circular approach. This is what we're talking about. I think this is a penultimate slide. I touched on a shared vision. I have a particular vision for eco-industrial parks. However, I'm trying very hard not to put that forward. Because at the end of the day, it's not about my vision. It's about the vision of all of us. Okay? And that vision should at least start with something that says, well, every person would like to work in safety, would like to have a job, would like to be able to take care of the kids. Right? I mean, these are really basic things, right? Okay? So if you look at it from that perspective, then you can take it back and you can work backwards, and you can say, well, if that is our approach, what do we need to do for industry to actually add the value that only industry can? And this is what we've got to understand. Eco-industrial park approaches is about what can industry do that has a knock-on effect for the environment and the community. Okay? Right? That's where the focus is. If you talk about community development, same question. What can the community do but that has a knock-on effect for the environment and industry and the economy? Okay? You understand? You start seeing this picture, there's all this interaction that needs to take place. Okay? Collaboration partnerships, I'm not even going to go back there. Supporting and enabling industrial spaces. There are some people sitting here that have a skill set that can contribute to more efficient operation of these spaces. I'd like to encourage you, put up your hand, not physically, but put up your hand and say, here I am. Let's work together. Let's make a change. Because we cannot continue doing things that we've always done. It will not work. I'm sorry. And I hope I don't stress anyone out here. Okay? Change management probably is going to be important in this process. Sharing, building knowledge and tools. India will touch on some of that. And then, of course, for me, the vision specifically for industrial spaces for South Africa is We want to move to a different kind of look and feel for an industrial space. Okay? One that fits into a sustainable future for our kids. One that fits with a circular economy. One that adds value and that makes a difference. Not one that just utilizes resources and doesn't give anything back. Because that model no longer works. We cannot have a consumer mindset here. Okay? And I think that is my last slide. Thank you.